I shouldn't have knocked on her door that late, but something in me wanted to see if she'd actually answer. Her porch light flickered like it couldn't decide whether to stay on or burn out, and for a second I thought about turning back. Then the lock clicked, slow and deliberate, and there she was, leaning on the doorframe like she had already been waiting. "You're brave to knock this late," she said. And before I could stop myself, I smiled and told her, "Maybe I like the risk." I'd only moved into the building a few months ago. She lived across the hall, late 40s maybe, though I was bad at guessing. She carried herself like someone who didn't need anyone else. I'd seen her with groceries tucked against one hip, phone balanced in her hand, the way she brushed past people without ever brushing into them. She was polite, sure, but there was something sealed off about her. That night I told myself it was just about asking if she still had the toolbox she'd offered me once, when I was struggling with a loose cabinet door. Truth was, I didn't need it anymore. The cabinet was fixed. I just wanted a reason. Inside, her apartment was warm in a way mine wasn't. Not cleaner, not brighter, just lived in. A blanket tossed over the arm of the couch, a coffee cup half finished on the table, books stacked in uneven towers against the wall. I noticed she hadn't bothered to hide the mess. That made me feel stranger than it should have. "You really came for the toolbox?" she asked, turning toward the kitchen. I hesitated, then nodded too quickly. "Yeah. The toolbox." Her laugh was soft, like she didn't believe me but wasn't going to press. "It's in the hall closet." She disappeared down the short corridor, and I caught myself watching the way her hair slipped against the collar of her sweater, the way she moved without any rush. When she came back, she set the box on the table between us. "Here. Careful, it's heavier than it looks." I reached for it at the same time she did, and for a second our fingers brushed against the metal handle. Just skin, just nothing, but I froze like it mattered. She must have noticed, because she pulled back slower than she needed to. The silence that followed was heavier than the toolbox. I tried to fill it. "Thanks. I appreciate it. Don't mention it," she said. But her eyes stayed on me a little too long, like she was waiting for me to mention something else instead. I thought about leaving, walking back across the hall, setting the box down in my empty apartment, and pretending it was all normal. But I didn't move. The clock on her wall ticked louder than it should have. She crossed her arms, not defensive exactly, but like she wasn't sure what I'd do next. "You're different," she said finally. I blinked. "Different how?" "Most people wouldn't knock. Especially not this late." Her voice was lower now, not teasing anymore. I opened my mouth to answer, but the words came out smaller than I meant. "Maybe I wanted to see if you'd open." Her hand was still resting on the edge of the table. Mine was closer than it should have been. For a second, it felt like the room leaned toward that space between us, daring one of us to close it. She didn't. Neither did I. But when she stepped closer to hand me the box properly, her sleeve brushed against my wrist, soft and slow, like an accident stretched out just long enough to not be one. And then she said something I wasn't ready for, something that made the night feel like it had just begun. "So, what risk are you really here for?" Her question hung between us like smoke. "What risk are you really here for?" I tried to laugh it off, but my throat caught. "The risk of borrowing tools I don't need?" I said, setting the box down with a clatter too loud for the moment. Her eyes narrowed just slightly, like she could see through the excuse. She didn't press. Instead, she walked past me, brushing close enough that her perfume, faint, something floral but tired, settled in my chest. I told myself to leave. That's what anyone sensible would do. But my legs didn't listen. "Did you fix it?" she asked suddenly. "Fix what?" The cabinet. You came for tools. So, did you fix it already? I swallowed. She knew. Yeah. Days ago. She let out a breath that wasn't quite a laugh, wasn't quite disappointment. So you lied. I improvised. I leaned against the table, trying to steady myself. Maybe I just wanted an excuse. That made her still. She turned, leaning against the counter now, arms folded. For the first time, she didn't look sealed off. She looked tired. Not weak, not breakable. Just tired in a way that came from carrying things alone. You shouldn't say things like that, she said softly. Why not? Because, she trailed off, her eyes darting away. Because I've already had someone who used excuses to come around. And that didn't end well. Her voice cracked just slightly, and I caught something raw in it. Something unfinished. A breakup. A betrayal. Whatever it was, she wasn't ready to name it, but it hung there obvious. I should have stepped back. Instead, I noticed the small things, the chipped nail polish on her thumb, the way she gripped her elbow with her opposite hand, almost hiding it. The slight redness around her eyes, like she hadn't slept well. Dangerous, I thought. Not because she was older, not because she was my neighbor, but because I already wanted to be the one who eased that weight. I cleared my throat. I'm not him. She gave me a look that made my chest tighten. You don't even know what he did. Maybe not. But I can tell you're still holding it. Her silence was sharper than any words. The clock ticked again, filling the space between us. I ran a hand over the back of my neck, heat prickling there. I wanted to say too much, to tell her I noticed every detail, the kind she probably thought no one did. That I noticed her. Instead, I managed. Do you want me to go? She looked at me for a long moment, unreadable, then shook her head almost imperceptibly. No. I blinked. No? Stay. Just a little longer. Her voice had changed again, not steady this time, but softer. And when she reached out, fingertips brushing against my arm as if to keep me from leaving, my pulse jumped. It was nothing. Just a touch. But it burned like a promise. Her fingers barely touched my arm, but the echo of it stayed long after she pulled back. I told myself to step away, to create distance, but instead I leaned into the silence, waiting for her to say something more. The moment broke when her phone buzzed on the counter. The sound startled us both. She picked it up quickly, glanced at the screen, and pressed the side button to silence it. No answer. Just a quick flicker of something in her eyes. Irritation? Fear? Regret? Wrong time, she muttered, setting it face down. I wanted to ask who it was. I didn't. Instead I asked, someone important? Her lips pressed into a line. Not anymore. The room felt smaller after that. Like the walls had moved in. I ran a hand across the edge of the table, pretending to study the grain of the wood so I wouldn't stare at her too openly. But it was useless. I kept noticing things I shouldn't. The way her sweater slipped slightly off one shoulder, the faint curve of a smile she didn't finish, the way she rubbed at her wrist like it hurt. I shouldn't have cared. But I did. Too much. You don't have to stay, she said finally, though her tone didn't match the words. I know. Then why are you still here? I hesitated. The answer in my chest was too dangerous. Because I can't walk away from you. Instead, I managed a half-lie. Because I don't think you want me to leave. Her eyes snapped to mine, sharp, questioning, like I'd said too much. But she didn't deny it. The air felt heavier now, charged. My pulse climbed, and I shifted, meaning to grab the toolbox and put an end to this before I ruined something neither of us could take back. But as I moved, she brushed past me to reach for her cup on the table. Our shoulders collided, too close, too deliberate. She didn't pull away fast enough. Neither did I. Sorry, she murmured. But her voice caught, betraying her. I swallowed hard, forcing myself to step back, to breathe. We should. I started, but the words failed. Then came the knock. 3 sharp raps on her door. She stiffened, eyes darting toward it, then back to me. Are you expecting someone? I whispered. She shook her head, almost too quickly. Her breathing had changed, shallow, careful. Whoever it was, she didn't want them here. The knock came again, harder this time. She reached out, her hand grazing mine in a silent plea. Don't say anything, she whispered, eyes locked on mine. I froze, caught between the tension of the unseen presence outside and the electric closeness inside. Her fingers lingered against mine, not just asking for silence now, but holding me there, tethering me to her. And in that suspended moment, with the unanswered knock hanging in the air, the thought hammered inside me, we're already too close to stop. The knock at her door didn't come again. Whoever it was must have given up. But the silence left behind felt even heavier. Her hand was still on mine. Not a firm grip, just a faint press of her fingers, like she hadn't realized she was holding on. Slowly she pulled back, but the warmth of her touch stayed. She exhaled, long and shaky, and leaned against the counter as though she needed the wood to steady her. I shouldn't have asked you to stay, she said finally. I shifted, unsure if I should answer. Do you want me to leave? Her eyes flicked up to mine. That's not the same question. I swallowed, heart pounding. No. It's not. For a moment neither of us spoke. The tick of the clock filled the room again, cruel in how ordinary it sounded compared to the storm in my chest. She looked down, running her thumb along the rim of her glass, avoiding me. You remind me of him. That made me still. The one who... She cut me off, her voice sharp. Not like that. Not what he did. Just the way he looked at me, before everything broke. Like I was worth seeing. The confession cracked something inside me. I wanted to tell her she was worth seeing, that I couldn't stop seeing her, but the words were too dangerous. Instead, I stepped closer. Close enough that the hum of the refrigerator, the faint citrus in her perfume, all of it pressed against me like gravity. Maybe I don't just remind you, I said carefully. Maybe it's different. She finally looked at me, and the weight of that stare rooted me in place. There was something raw in her eyes, stripped of the distance she usually held between herself and the world. Vulnerability. Hunger. Fear. Don't say things you can't take back, she whispered. I shook my head. I've already said them. Every time I knocked on your door. Every time I stayed longer than I should have. Her lips parted like she might answer, but no words came. The air between us felt like a wire pulled too tight. I saw the way her chest rose, the way she fought the same pull I did. My hand twitched at my side, wanting to reach for her, but I clenched it instead. I don't know what we're doing, she admitted, barely audible. Neither do I said. And it was the truest thing I'd said all night. For a heartbeat, it seemed like we'd break, one of us stepping forward, one of us crossing the line. But neither moved. Instead, we stood there, caught in a silence that said more than anything else could. Finally, she asked the question I'd been dreading, her voice trembling just enough to cut through me. What happens if we don't stop? Her words, what happens if we don't stop, were still hanging in the air when her phone buzzed again. This time, she didn't silence it. She stared at the screen, her jaw tightening, and finally turned it toward me before setting it face up on the table. The name lit across the screen, Daniel. Your husband? I asked before I could stop myself. Her eyes snapped up. Ex, she corrected sharply. Then softer. Almost. Papers aren't signed yet. The phone buzzed a second time, vibrating against the wood, insistent. Neither of us reached for it. That's who was knocking earlier, wasn't it? I said quietly. She hesitated, and in her silence, I had my answer. I felt my chest tighten, not with jealousy exactly, but something close. And you didn't want him to know I was here? Her expression flickered, raw, cornered. He doesn't get to know. Not anymore. But then she added something I wasn't ready for. And if he saw you here, he'd use it. Against me. Against us. Us. The word landed harder than anything else. I stepped closer, my voice low. So there is an us? She looked like she wanted to deny it, but couldn't. Instead, she pressed her palms against the counter, grounding herself. You don't understand. Daniel, he's the reason I stopped letting people close. He took what he wanted, and when it fell apart, he made it my fault. Always my fault. Her voice broke on the last word, and I felt something in me fracture with it. I'm not him, I said again, firmer this time. Her eyes filled, but she blinked it away quickly, refusing to let them fall. You're too young to say that like you mean it. I almost laughed, but there was no humor in it. I'm young enough to know when someone's hurting. Old enough to know I don't want to watch from across the hall anymore. Her breath caught, sharp, and for a moment, it seemed like she'd reach for me. Instead, she whispered, Do you even realize what you're saying? If Daniel finds out, if anyone finds out, then let him knock. I said. I won't hide. Her gaze locked on mine, startled. My heart hammered, but I didn't back down. I could see the war in her expression, the pull of something she wanted and the fear of what it could cost. The phone buzzed again, vibrating between us like a dare. Finally, she reached out, not for the phone, but for me. Her hand caught my wrist, firm this time, as if to anchor herself. You have no idea the mess you're walking into, she said. Then let me, I whispered. For a moment, all I could hear was the steady hum of the fridge, the muted vibration of the phone, and her uneven breathing. Then she asked the question that shattered the ground beneath me. What if I told you I've wanted this too? Her words, what if I told you I've wanted this too? Struck harder than any confession I could have imagined. For a moment neither of us moved. I searched her face, waiting for the catch, the laugh, the denial that would undo it. But there was none. Just her eyes, steady on mine, wide with a kind of fear that only comes when the truth finally slips free. You! My voice cracked. I had to start again. You've thought about this? She exhaled shakily, her fingers still on my wrist. More times than I should have. More times than I'd ever admit. Her honesty didn't light me up the way I thought it would. Instead, it made my chest ache. Because I could hear the weight in her voice, the guilt, the restraint, the years of telling herself no. I don't want to be another mistake for you, I whispered. Her lips trembled into something between a smile and a grimace. You think you get to decide that? I stepped closer. Then let me decide this. I don't care about the rules, the ages, the whispers. I just care that you're here right now and I see you. All of you. Her breath caught. She looked away, blinking fast, and when she spoke, her voice was raw. Do you know how long it's been since someone said that? Since anyone really looked at me and didn't see a wife, or an ex-wife, or... She trailed off, biting the inside of her cheek. I felt my throat tighten. I wanted to tell her everything, how I noticed the tiredness she tried to hide, the small ways she filled silence when she was lonely, the way she held herself like a fortress. But all I managed was, I see you. Her shoulders sagged, like the words broke something loose in her. And then, finally, she let go of the counter and stepped forward. Close enough that the distance we'd been circling around for weeks dissolved in a single breath. When her forehead touched mine, it wasn't dramatic, wasn't perfect. It was trembling and hesitant and human. "I'm terrified," she whispered. "Me too." And then her lips brushed mine, not a kiss, not yet. Just the faintest touch, enough to send every nerve in my body sparking. She pulled back, searching my face like she needed permission. I gave it the only way I knew how. I leaned in, closing the space, and kissed her. It wasn't clean. It wasn't polished. But it was real, raw, unsteady, and full of all the words we'd left unsaid. When we broke apart, breathless, she rested her hand against my cheek. "This doesn't fix everything," she said softly. "I don't need it to," I whispered back. "I just need it to be real." Her eyes closed, and for the first time since I'd known her, she let herself lean into me fully, no walls, no distance. The silence that followed wasn't heavy anymore. It was alive. The kiss lingered in me long after we parted, like a secret neither of us could put back. She stayed close, her forehead resting against mine, her breath shaky but steadying with each second. For once, neither of us filled the silence. Finally, she pulled back, her hand sliding down to rest on my arm. "I don't know what happens tomorrow," she admitted. I nodded, swallowing hard. "Me either." It was the first time all night that the uncertainty didn't feel like a threat. It felt like possibility. She let out a quiet laugh, not quite believing herself. "You realize this could ruin me if Daniel found out? If anyone found out? Then we don't let him," I said simply. "This isn't about him. It's about us." Her eyes softened at that. The word us no longer sounded dangerous. It sounded like the thing she'd been too afraid to want. She leaned against the counter again, but this time not to hold herself up, this time, she just let herself relax. "You've made me feel something I thought was gone," she whispered. "Like I wasn't just surviving anymore." I felt my chest tighten because that was it. That was the shift. From the first night I saw her carrying groceries, to every excuse I made just to knock on her door, it wasn't just longing anymore. It was knowing she saw me too. "I don't care if I'm young," I said softly. "I care that I've never wanted anything the way I want this." Her eyes lingered on me, and then, for the first time all night, the fear in her expression gave way to something else. Peace. She reached for my hand, intertwining her fingers with mine. No hesitation this time. "Then maybe," she said quietly, "we stop pretending we're on opposite sides of the line." I smiled, a little breathless. "So what happens now?" She squeezed my hand, a small, imperfect smile tugging at her lips. "Now we take it one night at a time. And we see if we're brave enough to keep knocking." The tension that had once threatened to break us was gone. What replaced it was something slower, steadier. Something that felt like the beginning of more than either of us had expected. We didn't need to rush. The risk was real, the consequences still looming, but for the first time, either of us cared. When I finally left her apartment, toolbox still in my hand, I caught myself smiling in the hallway. Because I knew this wasn't the end of something forbidden, it was the start of something real. Moral/emotional payoff. Sometimes the risk isn't in crossing the line, but in letting yourself be seen again after years of hiding. Did you enjoy the story? What kind of stories would you like to hear next?